Requesting to Dr. Bedi sir to proceed the session. Sir, we are really excited to hear from you. Sir, please proceed the session.
ঠিক আছে, কাল দিলেও হবে। শোকাক
Bedi sir?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir,
sir.
you are audible.
Yes, okay, fine. Good morning, all the participants. We are happy that from all over the country, various participants belonging to faculty cadres, research scholars, and students, they have all assembled at this platform to have an interaction on what we call the strategy of economic growth through self-reliance. This is a very recent development that the government of India is thinking of adopting a new strategy of economic self-reliance as a way to achieve faster economic growth and to create a type of economic system in which the economy is dependent on itself and is not subject to exploitation and is not subject to any other type of pulls and pressures on the economy from outside. One thing we must keep in mind that this strategy of self-reliance has a COVID context. It has come at a time when almost the entire world is struggling to free itself from the coronavirus. It has shaken the healthcare systems. It has shaken the economies. And there has been worldwide lockdown of economies for the different periods of time. And now the economies are in the process of opening up, and some economies are opening up even during the time when the pandemic has yet to reduce its rigor. But those considerations apart, the point is why we are talking of self-reliance now. First of all, before I proceed, I want to convey to all the participants that this is a webinar of all of us. All of us are participants, all of us the deliberators, and I am just in the role of initiating the discussion and sharing some of the views. And I would be particularly happy if the questions for the benefit of everyone and for the benefit of myself also, so that the discussion is as useful as possible. Because our Prime Minister just spoke about it last month, and it was very forcefully said that from now on India is going to proceed on the path of self-reliance, and very soon there would be economic reforms which would be forthcoming. So that way, although the policy of self-reliance has to be officially spelled out by the government, maybe in the reform system which will be forthcoming, that will contain that what is the government concept and approach to self-reliance. But I, from business point of view and from economy's point of view and from the standpoint of standard literature on the concept, I would like to share with you a dynamic understanding of the concept. The concept of self-reliance should not be understood from the dictionary, that self-reliance means do the things by yourself and be self-sufficient and all that. At the economy's level, many of the things they don't work, or many of the things are additionally required, and they have profuse implication for the national economy, for the world economy, for the society, for the business sector, for the individual, for everyone, for every participant, for every economic unit in the country. It has its meaning. And when India is one of the very few countries which has openly declared that yes, from now on we would be on the path of self-reliance. Now we as students of business, as students of commerce, as students of economics, we need to understand that what is this concept of self-reliance in the today's context. I'm not talking of the context of the pre-independence era, when Mahatma Gandhi used to say, used to speak about the self-reliance of villages. I'm not even talking of the period of the 5-year plans, when, for example, in the fifth 5-year plan, which started in the year 1994, we said that agricultural self-reliance would be one of the major objectives of planning. We are not even discussing that whether under the different successive 5-year plan to what extent self-reliance was obtained or not. Those were the different contexts, they were the different times. Now the context is different, the nature of the word economy has changed, and the meaning of the entire business terminology and economic terms, it has changed to fit into the today's context. The meaning of welfare which existed 1 century ago is no longer holding today, and today we are having we are adding the factors of sustainability, productivity, dependence, exploitation, human rights. All these things they have been added to the modern day concepts. So in fact, these things are very important because they make the whole thing interdisciplinary. It gives a look at the concept from the multiple point of view, so that they become more relevant from the point of view of the society. Now, in the beginning, I would like to share with you that what self-reliance means and what self-reliance should not mean, both the things. There are many people, both belonging to the discipline and both lying outside the discipline. They hold a static view of self-reliance. They keep in mind that perhaps self-reliance means being self-sufficient, not trading with other countries, deglobalizing, or something like which we call autarky, having no international economic relationships, use of the traditional indigenous technology. Yes, this was the connotation if I go 50 years back in economic history. But today, self-reliance does not mean any of the things. So that is why we thought that now that we are talking of self-reliance, and this is the concept which not only means that the economy will be having a new strategy to follow, but at the same time it will create a different type of business environment. It will create millions of business and employment opportunities in the various sectors of the economy. It will also mean the shift of economic and business opportunities from one sector to the other. So that way the economy is going to experience a long-term transition. If the economic policies and economic administration takes place on very efficient scales, this transition period could be minimized, and the results of self-reliance could be, we can start seeing the results of self-reliance much earlier than expected, and this is what we hope so. So with this context in mind, let us have a look into the contemporary understanding of the meaning of self-reliance as we understand it today. Many economies are already on the path of self-reliance, but they are not saying that we are on the strategy of self-reliance. We have taken a bold position. For example, when USA say, when in the USA they say that be American, buy American, even they are not saying that we are following the path of self-reliance. We want that our people should not buy the imported goods, but the American goods only. They are only saying it as a slogan. They want people to buy American goods so that the foreign exchange of the country does not go out. But they are not saying that we are on the path of self-reliance. Whereas we in India are boldly saying that yes, we are on the self-reliant path and we have certain logic and reason. And very recently we listened to the Prime Minister's address, and where the 5 pillars of self-reliance they were shared. And I would be coming to that. Well, if you want it now, it was said that there are the 5 components. One is the intent. We should have the resolution that we want to do it. The second is inclusion. The poorer sections of the society, they should benefit out of it. The third pillar is infrastructure, without which nothing proceeds. That is the pillar of all economic activity and the self-reliant efforts. The fourth is investment. And this investment can come from the private sources, from the government sector, and from even the foreign sources. And later on, we will see that whether foreign direct investment is consistent with the concept of self-reliance, whether import, export, and globalization are consistent with the concept of self-reliance. This is the understanding, this is the core of the understanding which this webinar, has the objective to portray. And the fifth component, as all of you know, is innovation. These five pillars were widely reported in the press. So they are the fundamental truths. Without innovation, nothing proceeds. But this would be a little too early to take up these components right in the beginning. But I want to focus on the dynamic concept of self-reliance, which we want to look at, and which the government very soon would be unfolding, and a number of initiatives will be seen by us, which is taken by the government, not only for the revival of the economy as the economy comes out of COVID, but also for the long-term economic growth. So it reflects an economic philosophy which is meant at benefiting the millions of Indians and their businesses in the country, and at the same time becoming a very important part of the world economy. Now, first of all, the concept of self-reliance, at the most fundamental level, it means that the economy has the ability to garner and hold economic resources beyond basic needs. That is self-reliance. Up to basic needs, we are talking of survival. Our economy, if we look at our economy, there are certain sectors where even the basic needs are not met. Maybe either the resources are not available, or if they are available, they are not utilized. So then beyond basic needs, there are certain sectors we are quite sufficient for our own self, and the things which we can export, and we can help with other countries, we can sell to other countries. So but when we say that this economy is self-reliant, it means that it has the ability to garner and hold the resources which are beyond the survival level, beyond the basic needs, or what you can even say the minimum needs. The second interpretation of self-reliance is that if there are disruptions to the economy coming from within or coming from outside the country, whether it is a medical disruption, it is a financial disruption, or some system has collapsed in one part of the world economy, then we should be able to sustain ourselves and withstand the external shocks bravely without much damage to the economy. This we call the assurance against international economic disruptions or international economic disturbances. There are two ways. One way is that you insulate yourself from the world economy. You put up walls around the economy, and then you say that I am having no transactions with the world economy, so therefore any disturbance happening outside will not affect me. That is not the meaning. We as an economy have all the economic relationships with the outside world, and in this scenario, if there are international economic disturbances, my economy is least affected. If this is what is happening, then our economy is self-reliant. That is, our internal resources are so strong, they are so viable, that those disturbances, when they take place, we are not swept off our feet, and we are able to stand on our own. And that is the concept of self-reliance. So self-reliance, thirdly, it means that this is a platform. Self-reliance is a system. It is a platform. It is the basis on which we can reach our full potential. If this ability is missing, our potential may be 100, but our achievement would be 30, 35 or 40. Beyond that, we are not able to go. Why we are not able to go? Because we are depending upon the world economy for several matters, maybe for innovation, maybe for investment, maybe for technology, maybe for managerial systems or whatever. So if we are depending upon them, then it is the established principle that any economy which is heavily dependent upon the outside world, it is never able to reach its full potential. It is always on the strength of the internal resources. That is the concept of self-reliance. Then fourth interpretation is that self-reliance is always associated with the self-sufficiency. It means that if the other countries of the world, they cut out their relationship with us, we are able to sustain. We can live on our own. That is we have all the essential resources, so that there are no panics. There are no crises in the economy. So if we are dealing with the rest of the world economy, it is on an equal footing and we are not depending upon them. So this we call the self-sufficiency on a sustainable basis. This concept of sustainability adds another dimension. I am not only talking of environment, I am not talking of ecology, I am talking of economic sustainability, in the sense that even if you cut your foreign supply chains to India, we are able to survive. We are able to live on the strength of our own resources. Our own domestic ecosystem is so strong. So that we are able to realize our potential. I will very soon come to its economic effects, because once the concept is clear, then my road is ready, and on that road I can travel fast. Then, so when we are talking of the resources, that is, we should be able to stand on our own feet and do positive, fruitful transactions with the rest of the world. This I am saying repeatedly, because self-reliance does not mean isolation. This is not a concept of insularity, that we should cut out with others and stand alone. This is not at all the concept. The research scholars who are here participating, if they want to write a research paper, they can pick up this concept. The students of management and economics, they might be appearing for their job interviews, they can listen to this concept, and the faculty members can join with me and deliberate to make the things clear, because ultimately everyone has to, the final benefit has to go to the research scholars and the students. So that way I want to make this understanding very transparent. So when we say that we should be able to stand on the strength of our own resources, what are the resources? The resources are our natural resource endowments, our coal reserves, our petroleum lying, our forest wealth, and so on. The physical resources, natural endowment, our skills, our talents, our resources, our efforts. You will say, how effort is a resource? Effort is a resource. Without effort, all these resources are idle. So entrepreneurship is an effort. Effort is a resource. Any country, howsoever rich it may be in terms of the resources, if it is not making the economic efforts, all these resources, they stop to have their meaning. And then finally, I would add the outside relationships. Now, these relationships can be positive and they can be negative. Positive relationships are those when we have international economic transactions and they strengthen our economy. The negative global relationships are those which drain away our resources. So, the students and scholars who have the research interest, they can think in terms of doing the research. I am giving you a research idea now. You can think in terms of, in these terms, that if you have a study of international economic relationships of India or any other country, you can see that which aspects of relationships are draining their resources and which types of their relationships are strengthening their domestic capabilities. This can be a wonderful topic of research, not only for publishing a paper, but also for doing a PhD research. You can carry it further depending on, but I have given you, and I will give you several more ideas also for suggesting the directions for research, which will be coming out of this discussion. So when I talk of talents, when I talk of skills, when I talk of efforts, I am talking of entrepreneurship, and which in the terminology of economics, it is known as the quality of human capital. I am not counting my population. The quality of human capital is what it is capable of, how much effort it is making, how it is contributing to development, what kind of innovation it is taking. This is the quality of human capital, and this quality of human capital is greatly supported by the healthcare systems, by education, by the moral values, by the attitudes, the skills, and the other things. These are the resources. Do you remember that about 5-6 years ago, our Prime Minister talked of the demographic dividend? So this demographic dividend says that population is not a burden. This viewpoint says that population is a strength. It is a resource. Our younger component of total population is very large. It is in that sense that it is a huge resource. So if you want me to talk in the language of an economist, I will say that he was talking about the quality of human capital. That for us, the population is not a burden. Population is not something we should be ashamed of. This large population is our large resource. He was talking of the quality of human capital. So this is the concept of self-reliance, which does not negate international economic relationships, but goes along with international economic relationships. That is the concept. But the core point is that even if you even if the other countries, they break their economic relationships with us, we would be able to stand on our own feet. There are many countries in the world. If other countries, they break their relationships, they will be driven into poverty. They would be nowhere. They will become the living examples of crisis. So after having said this, if you ask me that, sir, why self-reliance? Why didn't you talk of it earlier, and why you are saying it now? And what is the importance? What will happen what will happen if we are not following this strategy or this approach? The answer to this question lies in the first section, which I have already discussed with you. In 3 minutes, I will summarize that why there should be self-reliance. We need self-reliance to withstand external economic shocks. Number 2, this COVID-19 is also an external economic shock. It is an imported virus. It is not of Indian origin. So to start with, it is a medical problem. Now in the second stage, it has turned into an economic problem. In the third stage, it can lead to a financial crisis. But the point is, do we have the inner strength? Do we have the inner strength to withstand this type of crisis? So just as we need personal immunity to fight the virus, in the same way, the economy should also have the immunity. If economy has an immunity, it is self-reliant. If the economy has the immunity, it is self-reliant. That is, even if there is no medicine is administered on it, no external support is available, aid is not available, foreign investment is not coming, foreign goods are not coming, things are not coming from China, and again we are able to stand our own feet. This is the concept. And it is a matter of national pride, and it is a matter of economic sovereignty. It brings us more jobs at home. Economic stability is larger. We have greater control over the output. Then with self-reliance, if we are talking of our own resources, we are able to meet the requirements of our population more precisely. When the goods are coming from abroad, they may not be exactly according to our culture. If food is getting imported, it may not exactly fit or suit our palate. We might be changing our tastes to the foreign foods. Whether I am talking of burgers or noodles or other kinds of drinks, I am not changing that. So in one sense, if you ask me, that my Indianness is preserved through the Indian products also. I will refer to its economic aspects a little later. So if we want to retain our Indian identity, if we please take care of background noises. If we want to take care of our national identity, cultural identity, economic identity, then self-reliance is one effort which makes progress in that kind of direction. So you see now, I said that it has a COVID context. You know that very soon it is quite possible that our remittances may fall, because there are millions of workers uh, which are working internationally, and and many of them, they have lost their jobs, they have compromised on the jobs, and very soon, you see, we might confront a situation when our remittances will be falling, and in that way we need to do something so that we don't face a foreign exchange crisis. And if our foreign exchange supplies they fall, the rupee will depreciate very substantially, it will raise our import costs, and it can even subject the economy to inflation. So that way it is a self-reliance is a futuristic type of policy, as I can see this, because right now COVID-19 is a health problem, and we are all now witnessing that it is an economic problem, and in the third round it can become a financial problem, and unless we take a timely action, you see, the things will not be coming back to rail. Now some of my friends, they talk to me in the private capacity also. They sometimes ask me that is self-reliance anti-globalization. I have already explained it in the concept that self-reliance is neither anti-trade nor it is anti-globalization, because self-reliance is a concept which basically says that we have the ability to stand on the strength of our own resources, and at the same time I am saying that when we stand strong on the basis of our own resources, then from that healthy position we are transacting with the world. I give you an example. You know that the American cars are selling worldwide because of their very superior technology. At the same time, USA is an importer of cars. But when USA imports cars from Korea, from Japan, and from Europe, we cannot say that USA is depending upon the import of cars, because it itself is a very large exporter of the same. So USA is engaging in the international trade in cars on a self-sufficient basis. Even if the world stops exporting cars to the United States, it can very, very easily stand on its own feet. Similarly, if the world stops exporting cars to China, China has a great ability to stand on its own feet. This is not true in case of many economies. For example, there are many countries, if medical supplies are not exported by other countries to them, if oil is not exported to them, if technology is not being sold to them, or if the machinery is not exported to them, their industry will receive a severe blow. Why? Because they don't have the domestic technology. So that way they become dependent. So in international politics, they are playing second fiddle to the major economies. So they become the silent, you see, the stamp holders, and they just speak what the powers on whom they are depending, what they are saying, they follow them. So that way they compromise their economic sovereignty and national pride. So that is why you can say that a self-reliant economy is very essential to protect the national pride as well. If you are economically dependent, political independence has very little meaning. So now that we are talking of self-reliance with reference to our own economy, now in the process you can very well see that how the business opportunities can be created and destroyed and shifted from one sector to the other. And all of us know that where we are heavily dependent, what are the areas where we are heavily dependent? Let me tell you that we are dependent upon, we have two types of imports. One is where we are dependent, and the other types of imports where we are self-sufficient, but still we are importing for the reason of quality or for the reason of cost. For example, in the case of petroleum oil, in the case of mineral fuels, we are heavily dependent because India is able to produce hardly 25 to 30% of its requirements, and the remaining 70% it comes from abroad. We have no choice. Remember, we are depending upon OPC and other countries who are the oil exporters. We can say that we are depending upon them because that oil comes, it meets our industry requirement, transportation requirement, other requirements, because we don't have the domestic capability. Here we are depending. But when the decorative lights are imported from China, when the tires, automobile tires are imported from China, it is not a case of dependence. This is a case where we are importing the tires because our own home tires are maybe a little more expensive. So those tires are cheaper. So we are bringing from them. Even chocolates could be coming from China. That doesn't mean that we depend upon them. So there is a large number of products which are coming from China, from Southeast Asia, from African countries, where we have the domestic capability and still we are importing either for reason of quality or for reason of cost. And that way this trade is taking place and our precious foreign exchange is going out. I will return to a little later on this question of imports. Can we do with these imports? And at the same time, you must keep in mind that we are living in the WTO system. We cannot raise our tariff barriers. We cannot impose the non-tariff barriers because we have already signed trade agreements under the WTO system. So that way, it is not within our choices to increase the tariff rates. So then, how to reduce the imports without raising the tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers? How we can do that? I will come to this a little later. So some of the areas where we are heavily dependent on imports is the mineral fuel. They are the precious stones and pearls which are used in jewelry, heavy machinery, nuclear imports, whether it is the nuclear fuel or the nuclear equipments, organic chemicals, plastics, animal and vegetable oil. It is a very substantial category, and for that we need to develop our own agriculture. Iron and steel, defense equipment, electronic hardware. For software, everything is fine. We are exporter to the world. We are working for others. We have very large skilled class of people, our young generation, which are producing the world class computer software. But on electronic hardware, we are depending upon the other countries. And these are some of the areas which we need to plug. Now, very recently, the government announced a package. I won't say that it is a self-reliance package because some measure to assist the poor, they were announced. The small-scale industry definition was revised. It was expanded on the basis of turnover and the investment criteria. And then they said that in the MNREGA scheme, you see the number of days for which the wages will be paid. It has been raised from 180 to 202 days, with something like 13 crore families they would be benefiting. And the government has said that we are disallowing global tenders which will exceed the value of rupees 200 crore. This will give the opportunity to the domestic businesses to participate in the bidding process, and the whole business will be retained at home. And the government has created a fund of funds for MSME sector, where they said that if we have some promising small and medium enterprises, we would be doing some equity infusion and all that. All these, some of the measures, they slightly go on the side of self-reliance. Many of them, they go to help to assist the population at the bottom of the pyramid. And some of them, they are giving the better financial access, the credit access to small scale industry and other components of industry. For example, when it says that we are waiving off the collateral requirements, or we are reducing the rate of interest, or we are making the lending norms comfortable. You see, so these are the steps to revive and kickstart the economy again. So that way, I won't say that these are the measures for self-reliance. So maybe we will have to wait for some time, and the government has already committed that they are working on the new reform package, and in that reform package we will see that what are the self-reliance components which they are wanting to say. Now, now when it comes to self-reliance, now it has a flip side. There are certain dangers, there are certain risks. The dangers, they have to be covered, the risks, they have to be covered, and the economy has to be prepared to proceed on the path of self-reliance. Now some of the risks and dangers are not real. They could be artificial, but you have to deal with it. In fact, the dangers which are not real, you have to do more effort to control that kind of fear, because it is psychological fear. It is not the real fear, it is the psychological fear. And you have to come forward in a big way. Now let us do a quick round of that. What are the risks or the dangers which are associated with the self-reliance? Some of them are maybe real and they require some intervention, and many of them they are not real. But in any case, both the types of risks and fears, they have to be addressed by the government, by the non-government organizations, and by the aware sections of the society. If the self-reliance drive, it has to be made comfortable. Many people are saying that we will go back to the age of 70s, where we will have the same old air conditioner, which is a huge consumer of power, making a lot of noise, and so on. So all these types of things are getting reported into the media. Well, they are the individual opinions, they are fine, but let us go slightly more scientifically into the thing. Because today I am talking to you, tomorrow people would be talking to you, because you belong to the subject. They would be talking to you and sharing these risks and dangers. So we as informed sections of society should be able to talk on a sound footing, and able to say that, well, this is the positive side, this is the negative side, and a correct balanced opinion, it has to come from our side. Now, first of all, the self-reliance, it can possibly give a wrong signal to the world outside that Indian economy perhaps is going to be a closed economy, and slowly there would be the closure, and they would be shutting down their doors to international trade and international investment. Or some of the MNCs which are already working, they may be postponing their new investment plans, thinking that now they are focusing on the domestic enterprise, domestic investment, and so on and so on. The playing field may not be level. That is, the government policy may be loaded in favor of the domestic investment rather than the foreign investment. So that kind of fear can be there, and it is here that the government has to come forward in a big way and say that no, it is not like that. The second thing is, the second type of fear is that while we say that existing investment may not expand, new investment, FDI, may not come, particularly in the areas where we want to be self-reliant. This is the danger. This has to be addressed at the policy level and at the level of the government communication on the policy front. And then it is possible that as India goes slow on importing, if we are saying self-reliant, I'm talking of import substitution. Self-reliant means producing those goods and services which are presently being imported. If as a matter of your manufacturing policy or other economic policy or industrial policy, if you are giving greater thrust to the production of those goods and services which today are being imported from outside, then the immediate consequence would be that the demand for imports will come down, the imports will be squeezed, and it is possible that there can be a retaliatory action. This we call a trade war. That if I am not buying your products, then you say that okay, I am also not buying your products. So in that case, import compression may lead to export slowdown also. If export slowdown takes place, will be a genuine fear, then the thousands of export oriented units, when they are unable to find the export markets, they may have to divert the production to the home market. So that way they will have to redesign their products, they have to change their look and feel and color. There are many products, for example, something which you sell in the African market, there is a no buyer of that product in India. If, for example, you are exporting hats to be worn by the British ladies, nobody is buying a hat over here. It is not a part of our culture. So but the manufacturing technologies with which you are with which you are manufacturing a particular type of product, with the same technology you can produce for the home market, but that takes a lot of time. Finding a new market, competing with the domestic manufacturers, because you are shifting from export market to home market. So there can be some pain point, and this pain, it has to be addressed. And this is what I call the transition period. And these transitional pains, if they are not properly addressed, you see, they can be so big that the progress on self-reliance journey, it can be slowed down. So generally, the longer the transition period, the more difficulties are anticipated. And if export slowdown also takes place, by the way, in a footnote, I would like to say one thing. Those students who are interested in international business, those scholars and even faculty members, those who are interested in international business, if you do a correlation study of exports and imports, you will find that both of them are highly correlated. Highly correlated. I'm not talking of cause and effect relationship, that which is causing what. But the point is that in the periods when the imports have been slowing down, there has been a slowdown in exports, and vice versa. It is not a case of perfect positive correlation, but the degree of correlation is very high, because there is a large number and quantity of imports which are used for export generation. Imports are getting used for export generation. So if there is a slowdown in imports, your exporter are also getting it. So while one scholar can take up a study at what is this causation between imports and exports, and what are the particular product groups in which the correlation level is high, in which product groups it is low, and what are the reasons for that. And if you ask me, this can be one of the perfect topics for a doctoral research or for publishing a paper in a high impact journal. You can do this. You can select a particular a particular categories of products, or you can select a particular time horizon. You can look into the causality between imports and export. Not only correlation, you can even look into the causality between imports and exports. But on one thing, you see, the empirical side of the whole thing is that when there are cut down on imports, there can be the cases when you are
ನಾನ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬರಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ರೆಸ್ಪಾನ್ಸ್ ನಾನ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬರಲ್ಲ ಇವ್ರ
there is a background noise, please.
Dear participants, kindly mute yourself. Kindly mute your mics. Participants, kindly mute yourself.
Well, please mute yourself, and very soon we will be opening for question answers.
Thank you.
So that way, if imports are going down, or let's say the rate of growth of imports slows down and the export growth rate also slows down, we will have to work out the values and see that what is the net impact on the foreign exchanges. If in the process our net foreign exchange inflows, they come down, then our dependence on remittances would increase. And if the Indians abroad, they are having a hit on their incomes, then there could be pressures on the rupee exchange rate. So rupee has already been sliding over the last, you see, 7 or 8 months. So these days, perhaps it is around 76 rupees to a dollar. So if it goes further, 77, 78, 80 and beyond, it can have its own compulsions. So why we are talking of imports? a student, any student of business environment or economics, he knows the standard GDP equation, that y is equal to c plus I plus g plus x minus m. M is a leakage from the income stream. M creates market abroad. When in imports, the product is manufactured abroad and we are paying for that. Our income gets leaked out to the rest of the world economy. So that way, import is a subtraction from our GDP. But the point is, if I reduce my imports, my exports also get reduced, which is an addition to the GDP. This economics has to be worked out. Now, let me give you a simple proposition. I can look at imports from three perspectives. Imports, all of us, we know that imports are the GDP reducing. But there can be cases when imports can be GDP neutral. Please listen to me carefully. I am sharing a very, very new point with you. All of us know from economics and from business environment that imports are a drain on GDP. Let me visualize two more situations when imports can be GDP neutral and when imports can be GDP enhancing. If you are having a concept of self-reliance, then you make those kinds of imports which enhance the GDP or which are neutral towards the GDP. They don't cause any negative impact on GDP, so that the incomes of the Indian population are not getting affected. Now let me share with you that what do I mean with the GDP enhancing imports. How you can have an import which increases your GDP? The question is, when you are making imports for final consumption, it is a straightway leakage from the income stream. Now I am talking of those imports which are used as input to the industry. Some value addition will take place. Now listen, if we make an import of rupees 100 rupees, they go out of India in terms converted into dollars. Okay. Now, if I do the value addition on imports by a value which is more than rupees 100, that is, I pick up the raw materials worth 100 rupees and make a finished product out of that which is worth 250 rupees, then 150 rupees is the GDP which, or the value addition or the GDP which I have generated out of those imports. Now, if I compute my national income, my loss of GDP is 100 and my addition to GDP is 150. So because the import is there, so therefore I am able to develop a product out of that through value addition, and that import material I don't have within my own economy. So if the value addition built on import is greater than the value of import itself, then import is contributing to my self-reliance, then the import is contributing to my GDP, it is adding to the national income of the people. I am a very happy person as an economist, because I am making an import which is not a leakage from the income stream, it makes a net addition. And in the very perfect case, if the value addition is 100 and import value is also 100, then I am subtracting 100 rupees and I am adding 100 rupees, the impact on GDP is neutral. So it means that if I have import worth $1 million and I do a value addition of again $1 million, so the product which I make, either it is consumed domestically or it is exported to other countries with value addition, then it makes a neutral impact. But if I am able to export, I am earning foreign exchange also. So my foreign exchange factor is also taken care of. So if I import a product, do value addition and sell in India, then in that case my GDP is not affected, but my foreign exchange is affected because I have paid in foreign exchange. But if I import, do the equal value addition and then export, then my GDP is not affected, my foreign exchanges are not affected. The point is that if I am able to identify those kinds of imports, the impact of which on GDP is either neutral or positive, then this kind of import is consistent with my concept of self-reliance. And this I am giving you another research idea which you can pursue, and you can write a paper on that, and or you can do a PhD research on that. or in whatever other way you want to do that. If you are writing a book, you can, or if you are contributing a book chapter somewhere, then you can build a full chapter out of that and do it. Okay. And I would be happy to, if there are, no, because this webinar time is very limited. So even if later on you want to connect with me, I would be too happy to do that. Time does not allow me to proceed further, to take this further, because I have to close it also. So now finally, if you ask me how to do self-reliance, how to proceed on the path, this is a very tricky game. The logistics to self-reliance, if they are not well laid down, if our route, our game plan, our journey does not have passed through the proper milestones, then the effort could be frustrated. Our Prime Minister said the first pillar is intent. I say intent, intent, and intent. This is all. It means your long-term passion to pursue this as an economic policy. And so that is why intent was number one. So this intention is very important. So if we are able to keep this intent, we will be able to pass through. It simply means that the entire gamut of economic policies, they will be arranged, readjusted, and all that. They will work in the direction of self-reliance, where we will not be accused of closing our economy, and at the same time we will be standing on our own feet. But let me tell you that at the heart of self-reliance lies technology and innovation. If our products are backward, if they are based on indigenous technology, poor in quality, ultimately they will be rejected by the masses, and the demand for imported products will continue to happen. If our entrepreneurs are able to give you the products which have similar quality as the imported goods, then why we should have a demand for imported goods? We don't know from where they are coming. Now there are millions of, you see, automobile parts. If you go to the auto market and you want a component of the car to be changed, now if you buy it from Hyundai, you buy it from Tata, you buy it from Maruti, if its price is 5,000 rupees, in the spare part market, the same is available for 1,500 rupees at 1/3 the price. It is a Chinese component. But if you look at the component, no name of manufacturer, no name of brand, no date of packing, no warranties are there. And the mechanic says, the moment it is fitted and your car goes out of my shop, I am not taking any guarantee, it is a Chinese product. But the point is, it could be the ball bearing, it could be any component in the car, and you find that it has gone well for 4 years or 5 years. So who will spend 5,000 rupees to buy a component from an authorized showroom? So therefore they are going to this open market and buying a so-called Chinese product. Now the point is, even if the product comes from Thailand, even if it comes from Vietnam, still they call it a Chinese product, because the shopkeeper himself doesn't know from which country it has come. It is not written on the package. It is an anonymous product. The risk is yours. When the component is fitted in the cart, the risk is yours. Chocolates are coming in beautiful boxes, and it is not written whether it has come from Thailand, from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from China, from South Korea, North Korea, from where. No manufacturing date, no packing date is there, no manufacturing date is there, but box is beautiful, chocolate taste is wonderful, fantastic. So the consumer is at all the risk. I am saying that if you could have authentic products, tasty products, useful products, which can be traced back to the manufacturer, there are the packing dates. If you could come on to the similar quality, absolutely no problem if you invite foreign technology to produce those goods and services. But the point is that in the long run game of self-reliance, you have to bring out your own technology. In the first round, you can do away with your imported goods and develop your domestic capability. In the second round, you have to do away with the foreign investment, because we are not wanting foreign investment for the sake of foreign investment. Our primary purpose is technology, because with the help of foreign investment, we will be able to produce technologically advanced goods which will satisfy Indian consumers. It adds to India's GDP, and some exports are also generated. Imports are also generated. Again, you can make a separate study. When a multinational comes to India, how much it spends on imports and how much it earns via exports and how much it is contributing to GDP and taxes, and find out whether it is a net drain to the economy or whether it makes a net positive contribution to the economy. That is a separate area of research. Many studies have done. I myself have done one study, but this is not the time to share those results with it because we will digress from that. But what I am saying is that ultimately, if you want to replace foreign direct investment, if you want to reduce dependence on foreign technology, you will have to strengthen your own R&D systems. You will have to innovate. And for that reason, you can even think, you means the government can even think of sponsoring a large number of promising students from India. They can go to the foreign technology schools under a contract, under a sponsorship, and then they learn from abroad, come back, innovate the processes, develop the indigenous technologies. In the same way, our existing engineers can be sent abroad under some sponsorship or contract. They come back, they strengthen. So that way we can involve foreign engineers, foreign technicians, foreign technocrats to work for us. Let us pay them salaries in foreign exchange, good salaries, no problem. But ultimately, if you are able to have the technologies which are commercially exploitable, which can lead to the generation of machinery and products which will contribute to the cause of self-reliance, the benefit is forever, the cost is once, benefit is forever. And this can be on a long-term basis. So whether you talk of services, whether you talk of agriculture, you talk of MSME or the large-scale enterprise, you can count the various components. Automobiles, pharmaceuticals, cement, oil exploration, wherever you are talking. You develop your own R&D. Government is already giving tax concessions. Have you seen hospitals? Most of the big hospitals, they are having the research centers. For example, in Faridabad, we have Asian Hospital. It is not Asian Hospital. It is Asian Hospital at a research center. Everybody is writing the research center and taking advantage of some tax advantages. But the point is someone who is asking them that tell me what is your research output? What new medical technologies you have developed? What new treatments or the new medicines which you have been able to innovate? How much reduction in imports you have got? These questions, they need to be asked. So invest on innovation, on R&D, on the development of new processes, development of new technologies, innovative design. We need to spend a lot in this area, give good tax concessions, send there are millions and millions of students who have the world-class intellect and their competence. Sponsor them abroad. Many of them, they belong to the poor families. Finance their education. For government, it is peanuts. It is a very small amount. You pay the fees abroad. They are also giving the scholarships. Send them abroad under the contract, bring them back, give them jobs, give them good salaries, involve them in research and innovation. Let them come out with new technologies, maybe for simple manufacturing processes or other processes, or in information technology. And even there could be research and management. You develop new managerial systems, new system to manage airports, new system to manage railways, new system for medical insurance, even ticketing processes, even radio taxis. You do management research, come out with the new systems of managing the things, and then that way you can generate a class of international consultants. You provide your services abroad and foreign exchange will start coming. This is self-reliance, which is global in character. It is competitive. It brings foreign exchange. It brings national pride. It makes you to stand on your own feet. But for that purpose, you will have to sit separately on this. Specialized teams have to be made, have to be constituted. Bring in the industry people, bring in the foreign experts, bring in the academic experts, bring in the civil society representatives, and let them decide a policy, not to be documented and just written that this is the policy, but and implement it relentlessly, ruthlessly implement the policies till the results are obtained. So that way it requires a fiscal intervention. And when you make such a type of big paradigm shift, big shift in the economic policy, the state sponsorship, state participation, it has to be of a very huge order. The government has to give the leadership till the results are obtained, and it is only then. Do you know that in one of my last webinars I had shared with you, and the audience was different, that in India more FDI has come into the services sector than in the manufacturing sector. We need it in the manufacturing sector, it is coming in the services sector. What do? In services sector, you need managerial systems. You don't have the manufacturing technologies and big machineries and all that. It runs on IT system and it runs on the managerial systems. So that way, India has great competence in both the areas. We have good management experts and we have the good IT engineers who have developed the softwares. We are preparing softwares for the foreigners. Now those foreigners are coming back to India with their FDI. Indians are working and they are producing the services and investing in India. This is bad. And whatever they are earning, you see, and then they are sending it back as profit to their own countries. So that way, the services sector, it is one area which you can identify that over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we would be self-reliant and we can declare to the outside world, we don't want any FDI in the services sector. We are self-sufficient in that and we are exporter of that also. We are the exporter of services in that. Okay, so that way, similarly, agriculture. Now we have a very large import category of edible oils. What is the problem? The farmer has huge experience. Your irrigation systems can be developed. There is a huge area under cultivation. The farmer's expertise is large. So many agricultural universities are there. Why don't you have a campaign where you can have a revolution in the field of edible oil? We had white revolution. India is self-sufficient in milk and the milk products. We are even exporting that. And we are very proud that there are organizations like Amul who are producing the world-class product and all of us the consumers. And in the same way, so if white revolution can take place, why a revolution cannot take place in the field of edible oils where we are very heavy importer of drug from outside? And if it happens over here, if we make focus of self-reliance in edible oils and a few other products which we are importing, we can look at our import list. So we can look at the import list. So that way, if you work fiercely in that, give all the incentives, ask all agriculture universities to do the extension work in this particular area, there is no reason that revolution should not come place. So that way, once it happens, you will be saving millions of dollars, which today you are spending on importing, you see, the edible oils into the country. And your own food industry, you see, that will develop. When we grow the oil seeds, then our food industries, they will be busy extracting the oil. Many new oil mills, they would be established, then packaging, transportation, logistics, insurance, so many areas which are associated with manufacturing. And that way there would be the multiplier effect on employment. And today the banks are ready to lend. So therefore, the financial institutions, particularly the public sector banks, they could be particularly asked to provide cheaper loans, particularly to those segments, particularly to those to the entrepreneurs in those areas which are setting up industrial units which are contributing to the objective of self-reliance. So if the government identifies a list of industries, declares it and says that these are our priority sectors from self-reliance in the mind, and if you are investing in here, then 2% concession will be there, the collateral requirement would be less, we will give you concessional land, or we will provide you these advisory services, consultation services, government can provide you with the equity capital, seed capital, so many things can be done. It is already happening in several areas. But if you give the color of the thrust of self-reliance in that, then there is no reason that India does not make a progress. So that way, self-reliance is a great thing because it is not the opposite. It is not the opposite of globalization. It goes along with the globalization. If we want to reduce imports, I am not talking of increasing the tariff duties, the tariff rates. I am not talking of putting quotas into that. But if the consumers find that the products made in India, they are cheaper, they are of better quality, they can depend upon them, then they will not make the demand for imports. And all those traders who are into the importing business, they will go away. And and that way we reduce the imports without increasing the tariff rate. Because we have already done the WTO agreement not to increase the tariff rates, but rather we are committed to reducing the tariff rates. So that way, even if at the reduced tariff rate, if we are able to produce those goods and services which we are importing at cheaper rate, and through innovation and research, we can give them the better quality. I can assure you that these millions of people who are unemployed in India, they will be able to find employment. Income would be generated at the bottom of the pyramid, and the engine of the economy will start kicking again on all the cylinders. So, but the point is that how sustained we are, what is our resource commitment, what is the quality of our economic administration, how efficient are our policies, what are our tax rate, what is the ease of doing business, and the political and the corruption factors and all that, and how focused we are. All these things, they are true, that they have to be there. They are relevant for all the economies, for all the times, and we have to plug this. And if we have this supporting ecosystem around self-reliance, only then we will be able to reap the fruits of self-reliance. So that's all what I have to say. So now I open the question answer session, and I will request the coordinator to please gather the questions.
Sure.
And in the meantime, I can please allow me to have a glass of water. Okay.
Sure. Definitely.
I come back to you in just a minute, and you please coordinate the question, and I just join you. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Sangeeta, I am back.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us
Okay.
again. Okay. Thank you for this informative session. You have given in so many research ideas. We will definitely work upon it. This, as you said, this Atmanirbhar Abhiyan doesn't mean India became inward looking or isolate itself. That will not happen. India will focus on being self-reliant and grow local brands and business. Now moving on to the question answer session, there is a question from Ms. Savita Bhagat. She wants to ask, with the government inertia in financing for research and development, how will self-reliance be promoted? Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Savita, for this question. As I said, that there is a total ecosystem around any initiative. If we are saying that we would be on the path of self-reliance, and this self-reliance has to be built on research and development and innovation, if I am not able to do good R&D, and I am not able to have an ecosystem which promotes research on a very viable and on a very effective and vibrant basis, to that extent, my objective of self-reliance will be defeated. In fact, when I talk of self-reliance, if I'm focusing on self-reliance, in fact, I am focusing on technology, and I am focusing on several other areas which will lead to self-reliance. And you have very rightly said that if our present approach, it continues to be relaxed, it continues to be a very formal type of thing, that you spend X amount of money on research and I give you concession and all that, unless we have a very strong monetary system, unless we do something to promote R&D, we identify our resources. As I said, if we could identify thousands of our young students from IITs and from other engineering institutions, and we sponsor them to receive specialized training abroad depending upon their area of interest. They come back, we identify enterprises, or the government plays a role, that these are the private or public enterprises. They have sponsored them, government is funding, part of money comes from the enterprise, and when they come back, then they would be actively associated. And the point is that if you are having R&D laboratories, then there should be no barriers, no difficulties in importing the equipments which you would be using in those labs. There should be no glitches or hitches in importing that R&D infrastructure. So the R&D management systems, R&D support systems, they first have to be looked into before we talk of self-reliance, before we can engage in a very meaningful, steps which we can take in the field of self-reliance.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. I hope it is clear now. Now I'm moving ahead towards the next question. Mr. Muqtazar Rahman Qazi, he wants to ask, in the present era of globalization, all the countries are interdependent in some way or other. No country is self-reliant. Moreover, sometimes trade takes place on the basis of comparative advantage. Under these circumstances, is self-reliance feasible or a possible solution so far as our country, India, is concerned? Over to you, sir.
I would again say, as I said it in the beginning, that self-reliance does not mean isolation. Here, there is a fine distinction which I want our participants to understand. That is that my question is that what is interdependence? Interdependence can be understood, seen in the positive context and in the negative context. Now look here. India, I would say, is dependent upon the import of oil because it meets only 30% or 25% of the total requirements. This is my dependence. Every import does not mean dependence. What I want to say, every import is not dependence. For example, the example which I gave, Japan is importing automobiles and it is exporting automobiles. If the imports are shut out, it can meet its requirements very comfortably. When America is importing cars and exporting cars, it is not depending on the import of cars. It is trading from a position of self-sufficiency. Now let me give you an example. There are many cases where India does not trade from the position of self-sufficiency. We have seen several occasions that let me take the simple example of onions. There have been cases when you export onions and the home price, it goes up to 100 rupees a kg. It means your domestic position is not comfortable, and out of your compulsion to earn foreign exchange, you are exporting and creating a severe shortage at home. Now, if you were self-reliant, then after meeting all your home requirements, then you export, and with the exporting, your domestic inflation will not take place with reference to that particular product. Prices will not rise. So what I'm saying is, when you say that all the economies are interdependent, now the point is, if I talk of trade, whether you are doing trade by compulsion or you are doing trade for your own voluntary benefit, if you have a competitive advantage, if you have a comparative advantage, it must result into competitive advantage. Do you know that we have very large stock of coal reserves? We have a comparative advantage, which are richly endowed with coal. But at the same time, we are importing coal. Now my comparative advantage is not exploited. it is not converted into competitive advantage. So I am importing coal. So India has all the base metals, you see, which are used in the manufacturing of steel, and India is an importer of steel. There are many categories of steel which we are importing, and that way, whereas we are otherwise we have the competitive advantage. So there are, similarly in the case of defense equipment, we are depending upon that. We don't have the domestic technology. We are not in a self-reliant position. What I am saying is that we should first develop our own capability, and from that position we trade. We should not export from a position of scarcity, and we should not import from the point of view of dependence. Because if we are depending upon imports, and if imports are not coming, we will be in crisis. So we want to avoid that situation, and I want you to understand the distinction between this compulsion and discretion. That whether I am importing because I am helpless, or because I am importing because I also have my domestic capability, but because my population wants differentiated product or new utilities and all that. But if you are not exporting the things to me, I can very easily develop my own capability. There is no issue with regard to that. So if that happens, then exploitation that does not take place. Otherwise, the countries, they start exploiting you. They start exploiting the smaller countries in political situations or in other scenarios, because those countries, they critically depend on certain items which are very important for their survival. Any other
Okay,
question?
thank you. Thank you so much, sir. There is one more question from Dr. Jovinder Singh. He wants to ask how the Asian tigers economies come out of their crisis in 90s. Do our country can learn from this case? Over to you, sir.
Now, you see, the Asian tiger economies, they uh, they grew to their present state on the basis of their development cooperation with one another. If you look at the Southeast Asian countries, today ASEAN is a big force. It is a group of 11 countries now. So they have a free trade area. So they have demolished all their trade barriers. There is a large number of developmental projects which are taking place. Labor, capital, investment, all are mobile, and you see, and it is attracting a lot of foreign direct investment. So today people are saying that if some multinational companies, they pull out of China, they will come to India. I will say that there is a big rival of these Asian tiger economies. They will think in terms of that. So if, for example, you go to Malaysia, and immediately you get connected, you create a market in 11 countries, because all the countries with whom you see that one particular country has made the custom union or a free trade area. And moreover, what is important is the ease of doing business. The taxes they have reduced a lot. They have spent a lot they have invested a lot on the human capital. They are spending a large groups of people, governments are sponsoring, they are receiving the technical training abroad, they are returning to their homes, and then they are innovating. As I just said, that we should also start doing that. And their economies have grown as a result of very meticulous planning of the various sectors. Do you know that Vietnam has emerged like anything? Thailand,
Yes.
in the field of textiles, you see, even China is finding it difficult to compete with the Thai products. They are coming with good quality at a very low price tags, and very good product. So Thailand is not only in tourism, but in several areas foreign direct investment has gone into that. Vietnam is a very great success. For example, it's a very small country, but still it is competing. You look at the foreign direct inflows into Vietnam and compare it with India, you will see the difference. You check up the FDI statistics and see where India stands in relation to the Asian economies, because they have done a lot to uh, uh, they have worked in that direction of making the doing business very easy in those economies. We are yet to make progress in several such areas.
Thank you, sir. Hoping that the insight is clear now. Now moving ahead towards the next question. The question arises from the question raised by Ms. Isha Gupta. She wants to ask how to be self-reliant with less resources and corruption in the country. How we can be self-reliant with the less resources.
You see, resource availability is a great advantage. If there are countries which don't have the resources, but still they are self-reliant. I will take Japan as an example. Japan does not have any iron ore. Japan does not have any iron ore. Iron ore reserves they don't have. They import it from India and from several other countries. They make steel out of that and they sell the steel back to India. It is their entrepreneurship. It is the superior technology. And Japan never says, no, although it does not have the resources. Technically, we can say that Japan is dependent upon the foreign countries for the import of iron ore. I'm just taking one example. There are others also. It is dependent upon that. But the point is, it is not dependent upon one country because there are at least 40 countries in the world which are the exporters of iron ore. But had India or had only 3-4 countries been there who would be exporting the iron ore, then this dependence would be precarious. Then they will be having a oligopolistic position with regard to this natural resource, and there could be some oligopolistic collusion and they could be charging high prices. But luckily there is good international competition in the export of you see this product which we call iron ore, and for which reason it is happening. And moreover, they have the world class technology. Computerization is of the highest order. So in spite of giving profit to the iron ore exporters, in spite of transportation, their value addition is taking place at such a low cost that they are able to compete in the world market space. And all this steel is going into the manufacture of automobiles. It's a big consumer of steel. So as you said, that if the resources are available, it is a great help. But if the resources are not available, then if you have the technology and your production systems, then this handicap can be overcome. But if you don't have the technology also, neither you have the resources, nor you have the managerial systems, nor you have the technology, nor you have the good system, then you will be a condemned dependent economy. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, sir, for your answer. Next, we are moving ahead. A question from Pooja Arora. Ms. Pooja Arora, she wants to ask, self-reliance is need of hour, but what are the bailout strategies of the government in this matter, especially for the failure of businesses? Over to you, sir.
Bailout strategies mean, what is it? What is the intent? Bailout means bailout from this. Is it a COVID context or something else?
Pooja ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? There is a doubt regarding the questions. Ms. Pooja,
Yes, Pooja, what is it?
Sir, financial assistance.
Can you complete your question again? Can you repeat your question?
Sir, in case of failure of the businesses, as a self-reliant person, what are the bailout option the government is providing a business entrepreneur to safeguard his interest?
You see, these things are laid down in the Companies Act, that how a company can exit that. The point is whether the government wants to bail out or the government doesn't want to bail out. Otherwise, we see business failure, you see, it is very much a market phenomena. But when the failure takes place along a range of industries and the whole industry is in crisis because of some environmental factor which relates to policy, business environment, external shocks, or a pandemic type of situation, then normally what it does is that there could be moratorium on loans, or for fresh investor or fresh equity infusion. It could be going in for, or some, if there are some dues to the government, then those dues could be either postponed or they could be waived off. But in any case, the financial liabilities which a particular company has to make, they will remain as it is. But the point is, if you go into the Sick Industrial Companies Act, so when the company goes sick, then there are the criteria. How do you identify the industrial sickness? how much of you see the net worth should be eroded before you say that you are a sick company. And then you see some banks also, they work out they restructure their loans to help a particular industry, but ultimately the industry has to take care of itself. These sports are relatively marginal to the existence of a company, but they do matter.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, now moving towards the next question. The question is by Ms. Divya Goyal. She wants to ask, will the current employment scenario give impetus to becoming self-reliant by turning into entrepreneurs? Shall I repeat the questions?
Yes, please do that.
Will the current employment scenario give impetus to becoming self-reliant by turning into entrepreneurs?
No, I nowhere see that if a person is unemployed, he will become an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurship is a different kind of risk-taking ability. It requires the vision about a business. It requires some financial support. It requires some understanding of the business processes. Not that one is just out of employment so he can do his or her own business. But well, if you are in the informal sector, you can set up a small roadside shop, because there the investment is very little. So that way, in the informal sector, people have to find some way of earning money, and they could be setting up petty businesses. Well, those things apart, but when it comes to doing entrepreneurship at a scale that you are able to set up a well-identified micro enterprise, so there you need some training, some entrepreneurial ability, some seed capital, and understanding of the market, and some financial support. Only then. So merely by saying, if in fact you make a survey of the people who are unemployed, you will find that first of all they will make all out effort to regain their lost employment. And those who take up entrepreneurship by choice, they would even leave a job and then start their own business. That is one thing. But if you say that as a matter of compulsion, it is the activity of the last resort, so there it is doubtful. Not that one is just unemployed, so therefore he can become an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is a very, very big term. It's a big term. But small petty businesses like opening a tea shop, or doing a small sweetmeat shop, etc., they can be done. That is true of the enterprises. But on any meaningful scale, entrepreneurship, it requires investment in the human capital.
Thank you so much, sir, for your answer. There is some different question has come out from Dr. Sushma Kushwaha. She wants to ask, what will be the impact of reverse migration from other countries on self-reliance strategy from our Indian economy?
From other countries or from other states?
From other countries, she wants to ask. Yeah, from other countries.
You see, so far we have not seen reverse migration from other countries. Many people came in the present COVID situation from abroad, those who said that they were stuck up, and the government made special arrangement. They came back to India, and again they have gone back. Many of them, they have gone back. Some of them are still in India. So the people who have got a PR abroad, who have got citizenship abroad, they have all their houses abroad, their jobs are abroad, or their businesses are there. Ultimately, they would be going out. I don't think that their number is so big that it should be causing some type of impact on the economy or on self-reliance or anything of that. Self-reliance is a thing which is yet to come. We are discussing it. It is yet to come, but it has not. But yes, we cannot say anything about the future. What will happen to the world economy? So if there are more disruptions, it is possible that a few lakh people could be back to India. But remember that they have a huge stock of savings with them. They are the people who have worked abroad in good enterprises, and or who have done business over there, they will very quickly set up place of businesses for themselves. Many of, yes, in their case, you can say that many of them, by losing their jobs abroad, they can become entrepreneurs in India. That is possible. So that way, it will be some help in the direction of self-reliance. But these people, given the choice, who have been abroad, you see, they again have a liking to go abroad because their families are abroad, their business and jobs are abroad. But if there are some, you see, crisis abroad, and there is a disruption to
impose tariffs on specific countries, doesn't that violate WTO principles?
Yes, this violates. This certainly violates, and that is why when such trade retaliation measures are taken, and this is because of the direct political factors. And you just announced that I am stopping flights from China. I am not doing trade with this. I am suddenly increasing my tariff rates. When this now, in fact, these retaliatory measures, they're very temporary in nature. Some of them for 15 days, for 2 months, for 3 months, and so on. And then there is a reciprocal, again, there is a retaliation on the affected country. And so if the other country does not retaliate, then it becomes aggrieved, and it takes the dispute and the complaint to the WTO. And if you see that over the last 4 or 5 years, WTO has given several rulings against USA that it has violated the WTO norms. And WTO, and that way USA has made amends also. Because of that, WTO has given the judgment. You see, when it comes to financial resources, because of the economic position, USA is the largest contributor to the WTO, and it is playing a leading role. But sometimes you have some political leaders who, because of very situational factors, they will apply some trade restrictions or do something which will you see, hurt the interest of the other countries for political reasons. So these objections come, and you know, then WTO mechanism, it comes in motion. It gives the rulings, verdict, and the other countries, they have to comply. You can always commit a crime and go in jail for 6 months and again come back, or pay the fine and come back. It's just like that.
Thank you so much, sir, for your answer. The last question is from Neha Tripathi. Being self-reliant in current pandemic situation to those goods services exported from the countries like China, what could be the consequences in foreign exchange, and how much time Indian market take time to become full-fledged self-reliant?
Yes, it's a good question, and it is this fact the central concern of the webinar. You see, again, talking in the Indian context, the moment you start becoming self-reliant, no country has any problem with India going in for import substitution. No country. It is our internal economic matter. Nobody should be aggrieved on that score. Okay. The point is how I am reducing my imports. That is the point. Am I reducing the imports by putting up additional duties? Am I reducing the imports by imposing quotas, or by imposing other artificial restrictions? If I am doing that, it is WTO actionable. Immediately the complaint will go to that. The country will retaliate and take the matter to the WTO, and we will have to comply with that. Otherwise, otherwise any country can face a trade boycott. So we can, no country can afford that. So today there are 164 countries who are the members of WTO, right? So that way 98% of the international trade is accounted for by the WTO members. You have to comply with that. We have signed, and agreements have been ratified by the parliament. But the point is, if the tariff levels are the same and no additional non-tariff barriers are there, and the country reduces the demand for imports, then no country can ever have nobody forces us to buy the imported goods. It is our perfect discretion. Who are we? We means the manufacturing enterprises and individuals. If for example, you have the demand for an imported mobile handset, and let us say 1 lakh people have the demand for mobile handsets which are imported. which are foreign brands. So what will happen? Because the imports are permitted, so the people who have got the import license, they will import and they will sell to us, or they will come to us through online sellers like Amazon, Flipkart and all that. But if we ban the import of those items, then immediately it becomes actionable. You say it cannot be that. But if you don't demand imported handsets and you go in for Micromax or some Indian brand, it is perfectly okay. There are many food products. If you say, if all of us decide that we will not buy imported chocolates, it's okay. My chocolate import will come down by 50%. So my tariff rates are the same, but voluntarily we are doing that. That is why the government is emphasizing. That is why the government is campaigning at the level that, well, make in India. You buy the Indian products. You see you buy you buy the products which are made in India, because that will support employment to our own people. It will create the demand for our own industries. And if we make it our habit that before buying a product, we get a little concerned about whether it is a foreign brand I am buying or the Indian brand I am buying, and adjust my demand accordingly, that, well, the demand for imports will come down. No country should have any objection. So that way, so that way it is a voluntary reduction in imports. There is no issue with regard to that, and self-reliance will demand that. But for this reason, I as a customer must be convinced that if I am buying an air conditioner, if I am buying an air cooler or an air purifier or any other, or I am buying a juicer mixer grinder for my kitchen, then the Indian brand, one Indian brand is Gopi, for example. Gopi is one brand which is Indian. It's a very good machine, I can assure you. And then you have the Philips and Samsung and Hair and few other imported brands. We know that. But, well, if I am buying my India made product and I find it okay, the demand for imported goods will fall. If it falls, our foreign exchange will be saved. But the point is that good quality domestic products at reasonable prices, they should be available with all the after sale services which are associated with that. So therefore I say that self-reliance is a concept of innovation and quality. We must have innovative products. They should be goods and they should be price.
Participants, kindly mute yourself. Thank
So
you,
I'm
sir.
Yes, so I am saying that the domestic goods, if we are able to manufacture the goods which are at competitive price, they are at competitive quality, and they deliver the utility and the functionality, they are according to the consumer taste. And if they are purchased, the demand for imported goods will go down. And this thing will happen when our policy efforts are focused. And there are incentives in that direction.
Thank you so much, sir, for your answers or giving us so much insight about this current topic. As we are running short of time, we are not able to answer each and every one. So all those questions which are not answered, we will answer through the mail. Thank you for raising your doubts, for raising your questions. Thank you for your active participation. As rightly said by the sir, India today has the best of resources, power and talent. We can and we will make the best product with the improved quality, and we shall modernize our supply chain. There are two components of self-reliance in India. First is developing, promoting, and selling world-class brands. The second one is to attract multinational foreign companies desirous of relocating from China post-COVID by providing them best business facilities and environment. In order to be vocal for local, aggressive brand promotion will be needed. China's weakened global position is a golden opportunity for India to attract more investment by providing environment for a new world factory. We need to understand three things in this stage: make in India, make for India, and make for the world. We are ending this session, but we would like to convey our vote of thanks. Now we are ending with the vote of thanks. A warm and graceful afternoon to most valued Honorable Speaker Dr. Suresh Bedu sir, Management Committee, faculty members, and everyone present on this platform. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks speech and acknowledge the contribution of those who really work hard to make this event happen. On behalf of BS Anankuria, myself, Dr. Rashmi, express really hearty vote of thanks to our guest speaker who spared time from their busiest schedules to grace the occasion. We had an opportunity to hear from your thoughts. This will surely be going to encourage us in our future events. Your thoughts have enlightened our mind. Next, I am extremely thankful to the Chairman, Sir, Mr. Divya Gupta, for his efforts and leadership. Sir, I need to mention our deepest sense of appreciation. A special mention to the Director, Sir Professor S.S. Tyagi, for being the catalyst that stimulated us to do our best and standing as a pillar of strength. And would like to thank our principal, Sir, Dr. Pawan Badana, for his untiring efforts. Finally, I would like to thank Ms. Kamna Ma'am, Head of the Management Department. And a big thanks to the technical team, Mr. Jitendra Chaudhary, Sir, and Sangeeta Ma'am. Without them, this event cannot be possible to run. Last but not least, a big thank you to all the 200 participants across the nation, across the country. A big thank you to all. Thank you for making this event success. Thank you so much to each and everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, all the participants.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
sir. Thank you
Okay,
so much,
thank you.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And
Bye.
thank you, Dr.
Bye,
Rashmi
everyone.
ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Bye,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Thank you so much, sir.
All the participants.
Ma'am, please mention the feedback form is available in the chat box.
The feedback form is mentioned on the chat box. Kindly fill the feedback as it is important for the sake of improvement. The e-certificate will be provided on the basis of feedback form submission only. So be right it weekly. All of you, please fill the feedback form. It's there on the chat box.